1 month ago, the International Court of Justice found that there was a plausible risk that Israel may be committing genocide in its war on Gaza. One of the few voices within Israeli politics supporting this case was Ofer Cassif, a member of Israel's parliament called the Knesset, from the left-wing Arab-Jewish Hadash Ta'al party. When Cassif argued that the ICJ case was a legitimate and necessary investigation, his fellow lawmakers attempted to expel him from the legislature, narrowly failing to do so last week. Ofer Cassif joins me now to discuss the current climate in Israeli politics and society. Mr. Cassif, thank you so much for joining me on UpFront. Your fellow lawmakers tried to expel you from the Knesset because you supported South Africa's genocide case at the International Court of Justice. Although you consistently condemned Hamas's attack and you even lost friends personally on October 7th, your fellow legislators called you treasonous, and they accused you of being a supporter of Hamas. How bad are things right now? How repressive would you say conditions are for those who dissent inside of Israel?
We are on the brink of a fascist dictatorship. Let's be frank. Before the massacre, which you totally and rightly said, I totally condemn, and I lost some good friends there. But first and foremost, ideologically and morally, I totally condemn this massacre, this carnage committed against innocent civilians by Hamas. So this, even before, we know that the government of Netanyahu and his companions, which are thugs, mostly fascist ones, they tried to pursue or carry out a coup d'etat under the sugar-coated term judicial reform. But once the massacre of Hamas was committed, the government has been using this terrible massacre, this terrible catastrophe, as an excuse to pursue with the very same coup d'etat under the smokescreen of the war. Part of it is not only the ongoing massacre and destruction that the government of Israel is responsible for in Gaza. It's also the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank, but it is also political persecution of any opposition voice that is raised within the state of Israel, mainly if it comes from Arab citizens, but not only. We are, all of us, leftists, democratic Jews, and as I said, mainly, first and foremost, Arab citizens, we are all under an ongoing violent persecution by the government and its proxies, like the Israeli police, for instance, which is...
I'm glad you mentioned that, because these people, this coalition of dissenters that you're talking about, it's not a small number anymore. Just this past weekend, thousands of Israelis took to the streets in protest against Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government. They demanded early elections. They demanded a deal to release the remaining hostages in Gaza. The polls show that Netanyahu has low support and that the support is dropping.
That's true.
And what's interesting is, oftentimes wartime presidents, their numbers go up. His are still dropping. His are still dropping. So given all of that, is he leaving anytime soon?
Look, he doesn't like to, he doesn't want, he's terrified of leaving because he knows the only chance he has to stay out of prison is by clinging to his chair. That's the main reason that he is ready and actually does sacrifice not only thousands and thousands of Palestinians, but also the Israeli hostages and soldiers. They are sacrificed on the altar of Netanyahu and his thugs' own interest and to survive in power. The government for them is more important than the citizens and people of Israel, let alone the Palestinians. They don't care about the people of Israel, let alone the Palestinians, the government and the prime minister and its ministers.
But on that point about the they, I want to talk about who this they is, because there was a poll in January. That showed that over 90% of Jewish Israelis believe that the military uses either an appropriate amount of force or, get this, too little force in Gaza against the Palestinians. How do you explain that? How do you make sense of it?
First of all, I'm not sure that we can speak about 90%. That seems to me, an exaggeration. But in the bottom line, unfortunately, the vast majority of Jewish citizens in Israel, and I really lament that, do think that this assault on Gaza is not only legitimate, but required. There is a tsunami of fanatic nationalism in the Israeli society for quite a long time now, given this government, and especially since October 7th, definitely. The government wants to survive. As I said before, the prime minister and his allies, his fanatic allies, mostly messianic lunatics, they don't care about the blood of Palestinians and even of Israelis, as I said before. For them, blood is a kind of a gasoline that moves the machine, the messianic fanatic machine. Now, unfortunately, they use all power they have, and of course they have, in order to, brainwash the people who live in Israel. And unfortunately,
what role does the media play in that? What role does the media play in that brainwashing project you mentioned? And I say that because as we watch the news coming out of Gaza, it's pretty chilling. It's harrowing. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen footage of a 2-month-old infant dying of starvation. We've heard 6-year-old Hin Rajeb's pleas for help while being trapped in a car surrounded by her dead family members. Haaretz journalist Gideon Levy said that in most Israeli media coverage, it's as though Palestinian civilians, quote, do not exist, and that, quote, in Israel, you see only the soldiers, only the hostages. How true is this? Are Israelis seeing the suffering in Gaza?
What you just quoted and said is 100% correct. The Israeli media, the vast majority of the Israeli media and journalists, I can count on one hand, on one palm of my hand, how many journalists do refer to the catastrophe that goes on in Gaza. But generally speaking, the media, especially television, don't show anything about the ongoing in Gaza, the suffering, the starvation, the destruction, the death toll, the bodies on the streets. They don't show and they don't talk about it. It's not only that they don't show the ongoing, what's the destruction, the catastrophe in Gaza. They actually contribute to the fact that most of the people in Israel don't want to know about what's going on in Gaza. There are many philosophical, psychological, etc., ways to analyze and explain this kind of, overlook or apathy or even celebration of the death toll in Gaza. Again, unfortunately, we don't have the time. I can only say that referring to some publications in the past, philosophical ones, etc., no one likes to see in the mirror a villain. So the problem is that instead of changing oneself, the villain sometimes prefers to break the mirror. And that's what we're experiencing now.
Ofer Cassif, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your insights. All right, everyone, that is our show. Up Front, we'll be back next week.